Now that I've got these bits cut out, I've been able to start working on a prototype for the internal mechanism. If you can imagine that little piece as being a cartridge, it's not going to be designed to be loadable in any sort of way, except for the fact that I am going to make up a fake grenade piece that will sit inside that chamber area, and it'll probably be held in place with some magnets or something so that it can be removed, so the chamber can be either viewed as having something in it or being empty. The control mechanism that I've come up with is very similar to the internal workings of the 3D printed version, with a couple of minor differences. The 3D printed version was a tubular piece that slid inside the printed part because it was done as all one solid piece. Because I don't have that option, I've done a collar piece that goes around and outside of a tube. The control rod idea is quite similar though, in that it pushes that breech section open on a separate level from where it slides. So the principle is pretty simple. That piece slides there, which opens the breech. So, a couple of issues. This is a little bit long. That needs to be a bit shorter so that this piece is coming back closer to this stock piece, so that it should sort of bump up to it a bit more. But in principle it's working quite well. The top barrel there at the moment is not one piece, so I need to make that so that it's a continuous piece. And I need to work out an attachment for this forward mounting piece. It makes that a stable piece for that slide to slide against. You can see it's wobbling there a bit. The pump action piece has got a couple of bolt sections that should line up quite nicely to that slider piece and give us that sort of pump action that we're going for. In terms of the position and movement, it should just be a matter of milling out those two bits there and the same thing on the opposite side to create the correct slide distance we need for that to travel along. And then to give you a bit of a better idea on what we're looking at, that piece should slide down in there like that. All these bits need to be refined a little bit more so that they're a better match. And then we need the appropriate lock pins and screws so that that all sits in place properly, but that's starting to look like something. Again, we need to mill out the slot down the bottom here for where the trigger section is going to be, but so far I'm liking the look of that. So once I've cut out those bits in the cage section, I've done that on both sides now, I've just put a temporary rod through there so that I can test the mechanism. So at the moment it's just pulling back. I want to put a return spring in here so that it pulls it back by itself. And that is still a little bit tighter than it needs to be. It needs to be a little bit more free moving than what it currently is in there. But it's definitely working. So now all I need to do is just get it cleaned up and working properly. So at the end of the day, you've got to go with what works, and this is not working. The mechanism is kind of there, it's just not as responsive as I want it to be, and I can see other problems coming up with it in terms of there's not enough length to really accommodate the spring that I want to put in there for the return of it, and it's still very, very sticky in terms of its motion because this control rod is rubbing on the inside there. The other thing too is that this piece that I'm using in the breech section has a big gap there sometimes, and then other times it's sort of quite tight up there, which means that's flopping around in there as well. I need to come up with something better than this. Alright, so going through the different variants on making this thing work, the slide idea with a push rod, because of the way it aligns and the fact that we've got effectively a round peg in a square hole, there's just too much play in that, so I'm abandoning that idea and going to more of a rail system. This one was having two problems. It had a pinch point down close when it slid up this way, and it had two rocking issues. One which is where it was rocking that way and sort of just rubbing too much on the inside. It's just creating too much friction on the inside and getting stuck. And then the other tilt issue was it was tilting this way. So that piece that I had put on there can't be so tight that it wouldn't slide on this piece of tube, but having it loose enough over that distance meant that it could rock that way a little bit, and that also caused issues. So by going to a piece that's a lot more square, I've been able to simplify it quite a bit by being able to do it in one piece and setting it up so that these bottom pieces run more like a rail across this piece. I'll put it in backwards so you can see what I'm talking about. They'll slide across that way. Okay, that takes out that tilt issue that I was having. So obviously that goes in that way, but that means using this tube more as a support piece for those two rails to slide along, takes out that rotational tilt and the backwards tilt issue that I was having with it. The other thing that means now, by having this as a shorter piece than I had before, instead of having a pull spring to actually return it, I can have a push spring at the back. There's enough room there now, which just makes for a much more efficient use of space and simplifies the mechanism even further. So it's taken a couple of iterations to get it right. I did even try a combined version before settling on this sort of idea. So I need to now finalise that concept into a more workable piece. The resin piece that I'm using as reference and basing some of these parts off, that little bolt arrangement that was there was based on the middle row of slots as being where the pump action slides. But if you look at that really closely, it's slightly off where those bolts would go through. It's just a little bit off where the row does truly sort of line up to. So that is already off from where it should be. And then based on both the design that I'm working with and some of the other ones that I've seen in the original, that should be on the top row position anyway. So the difference with that little piece is it does do what it's supposed to do in that the bolts go through there to manipulate that slide mechanism for the breech. It's just based on this sculpt, the position of it is a little bit off. It should just be a little bit higher there than it is there. But it shouldn't be too difficult to sand that back and make that correction for when I cast this in the metal. Okay, so I'm finally happy with it. I've made up a temporary piece so that you can see how the slide action works, which is like that. And to break it down now to show you what I've ended up with, I've got a return spring that's in the back that pushes the mechanism forward. There's the temporary pump grip that I've made there. I haven't bothered cutting it out or anything like that, but that will be replaced by the proper one that will be cast, which will be held in place with the two screws that line up where they're supposed to be. At the moment I've just got a little U-shaped pin in place there for it. As I said, this is not a proper piece. It doesn't have any of the runners or anything like that to hold it in place, but it gives you an idea. Pull that out. That releases that away from there. Marries up, I don't know what you can see just inside here. You've got the two holes that correspond to where they're going to be. They go right through and pick up both sides of the piece. That then can slide the full mechanism out. The slide mechanism then are these two rails that run along this tube piece, and is just that one piece. So I've been able to condense it down to one piece. I'm going to tidy that up a little bit more, but that's essentially just to hold the spring in place like that, and then it'll be held at the back, and then the compression of it is what pushes it forward. So finally that's working, and I'm happy with the look of it. Having that as a U-shaped piece allows me to have room in there as well, so that I can put the trigger mechanism in place. There's nothing that's going to interfere with the spacing of that either. So anyway guys, that's the update for this time. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.